Stay tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. Joan served the state of California as a member on the Arts Council and on the Film Commission. She was formerly on the Architectural Commission and fulfilled 2 terms on the Fine Arts Commission for the city of Beverly Hills. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview magazine, Condé Nast Publications, and the Hearst Corporation, Joan covered the world of fashion, the mysteries of food, the excitement of theater, and the international art scene. She continues to find people who are on the cutting edge of their professions. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. We're here at the historic Hollywood Museum in the Max Factor building, and we're waiting to profile actor Robert Cicchini and author Matthew Spektor. Actor Robert Cicchini earned a BFA from Wayne State University and a Master's of Fine Arts at NYU. He's traveled the world working in his career as an actor, guest starred in TV, made over 30 films, and has been in a multitude of plays, working with Shem Bitterman, Joanne Akalitis, and Philip Glass, and you were at the Guthrie, the great theater.
Yes.
Were you there with Philip and Joanne?
I was, yeah. We did a Jean Genet play there called The Screens, which was an epic production. It's a 5-hour play about the Algerian Revolution.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was a very interesting experience because, you know, Joanne, of course, is a fantastic theater director, very creative person. And for that show, she convinced the artistic director, who at that time was Garland Wright, at the Guthrie, to remove about 1/3 of the seats from the house so she could extend the stage upwards, stage left.
That was the old theater.
Yes,
they
it was
have a
the
new
old
theater now.
Yes,
yeah.
It was a magnificent theater, and you know, much to their credit, he agreed. It's not many producers that would give up seats.
Exactly.
But he did, and we had this fantastic, huge stage to look like a desert. And in the play, Jean Genet's characters, when they die in the Revolution, they don't leave the play. They ascend to his heaven, which is a huge net hung up over the stage.
Is it up into the audience?
Up into the audience, yeah. So when the characters get killed or whatever in the war, they continue in the play and they simply go up into this net. And so when I was up in that net playing Pierre, this French soldier who had been killed, we started off the second act with a song, and I sang this Philip Glass composition a cappella, suspended above the audience in a net.
Unbelievable, because Philip Glass is not easy to sing to. We couldn't hum to him at that time. That was quite a while ago. Now you're used to his music and you can kind of hum it to it. How did you do that?
Well, you know, this particular composition was quite melodic.
Was it?
Yeah, it was a lullaby, and it was beautifully composed.
He's so great.
It was lovely to listen to, and the irony was that Genet's words to the song were extremely rude and lewd and harsh, and it was a strange juxtaposition to hear this lovely, you know, tenor voice coming from a young man somewhere up in the air, this beautiful lullaby, and suddenly these words start coming out, and the audience would always gasp. And
you were dead at this time?
Yeah. It was a marvelous production. We got reviewed by Time magazine.
Sounds fabulous.
It was fantastic.
How'd you learn how to sing? Were you singing before that?
Yeah, I studied voice at NYU, and I was just blessed with a pretty good voice. I haven't done many musicals in my career.
I was going to ask, were you in any musicals?
No, but I guess I'm known as an actor who can sing. You know, so a lot of times when there are plays, a straight play that has a song or two in it, I have frequently been cast in those parts.
Oh, that's great. You're a charter member of the New American Theater.
That's correct.
And it's both coasts, right? New York and LA. And you did something on both coasts, Man.gov?
Man.gov.
Man.gov.
Man.gov, which was the second the first play of a trilogy by Shem Bitterman.
That's why I was bringing Shem into this conversation, because you've worked with him a lot.
Yes.
And so did he direct it, or he just write the play?
He wrote it, and Steve Zuckerman directed it.
Oh, and you worked with him,
who's our
too.
director for the current play also. And previous to that, we the New American Theater, which was then called Circus Theatricals, we did a play of Shem's in, I think it was about 1999. It was called The Job, which we premiered here in LA, and we also took that to New York.
What do you do in a situation like that? How do you move? Like, you just move?
Well, no, I mean, I guess...
You have to like reestablish yourself in New York. You don't know how long the play's going to go,
Right.
do you?
No, you don't. These were all open-ended runs. The first one was at the WPA Theater, and we were actually the last play that they did before they lost their lease, unfortunately.
Was that The Job?
That was The Job.
The Job.
And then man.gov we did, I think it was the 47th Street Theater or something like that. And, you know, it's just...
Where do you live? What do you do?
I mean, fortunately, I have a lot of friends in New York. So sometimes I will ask them if I can, you know, crash with them or whatever. A lot of them have really nice apartments, so it works out rather nicely.
Do they do the same to you if
Yes,
they're coming
of course.
out here?
They're always welcome. And then other times, you know, the producer finds us lodging, which is what happened during
that's what I wondered.
during man.gov.
That's what I wondered. That was Shem's, what, 2 plays, and then the third play was Open House?
No,
Or
the
there
third
were
of the
other ones
trilogy
in
was
between?
called Influence, which we did here at
Oh,
the Skylight
Influence.
Theater.
Right.
It was a big hit. And this play is a standalone play. It's not part of any other.
The play we're talking about, Open
yes,
House,
Open
which is
House.
at the Skylight. But you also did Influence with Shem and your leading actress?
Yes, Eve was in that. Yeah.
Eve Gordon
Eve
was
Gordon
in that too. So you've acted together, Eve and
We
you
have.
and Shem. And the thing with Open House, tell us the story, and then I'm going to tell you my observations.
Okay. Well, basically, the story of Open House is a guy selling a house. A guy's trying to sell a house, and he has one particular client who is the only client who's interested in the house. And as the play develops, you begin to realize that, you know, these are 2 lonely souls who have a lot of baggage.
A lot.
Yeah. And I don't want to give away the play, but as the play develops, you know, it's like peeling an onion away. You begin to find out more and more and more about these 2 people who you assumed at the beginning of the play were just, you know, every man and every woman.
Yeah, you
And-
just sat there. You like, I've got an open house, you open the windows, you open the drapes, you sit down, you read the newspaper. You're on the stage for how many minutes? 8?
Yeah, probably
10?
8 minutes, I'd say about that.
Not saying a word.
Without saying a word, yeah.
And I'm sitting in the front row going like, how is he doing this?
Right,
And
yeah.
you don't pay any attention to what's going on. Do you actually read the paper? How do you know when your 8 minutes are up?
Well, I go by feel, you know. And
or 10 minutes or whatever it is.
And you know, I have to use reading glasses to actually read, so
So you don't-
so I can't actually see the paper well enough to read it. So what I've done is I've memorized the paper so that I
you
can,
open the newspaper.
so that I know exactly what it is I'm pretending to read, so that information is actually going through my mind, so that I can be connected to it in an authentic way, so that I'm not just pretending to read the paper and reacting to things that I don't see or understand. I understand what it is I'm thinking, and I'm reacting to specific information.
And so each of the things that you do leads to the next thing, leads to the next thing, I
Yeah.
guess, and that gives you your time frame.
Yes, it does. And you know, it's a very risky way to begin a play.
Oh, it's really
And-
amazing.
Yeah, and it's a very risky play. And of course, when you're in a situation like that, you know, the risk that we're running, for one thing, is to alienate the audience.
Oh, right.
You know,
like they're through, right? They don't want to watch anymore.
Yeah, and so as the actor, you know, you feel beholden to make this interesting enough so that they won't go away mentally.
And what do you
from
do? You know, the other thing is the lights flash, flash,
Yeah,
flash.
a lot of blackouts.
And we wonder what you're going to be doing next.
Right.
And you're still sitting there in the room.
Right.
And talk about peeling the onion. You talk into that cell phone and you divulge yourself
Yes.
little by little,
Yeah.
right?
That's exactly right.
Is somebody talking to you on the other end?
No, it's all made-up conversations. I've developed the conversation. I know what they're saying to me, but of course,
Do you hear 'em?
I'm not hearing anything. It's all in my head.
I was speaking to your co-star, Eve Gordon, and she said it's different every time you work. Do you feel the same way? The
Yes,
play is
yeah,
different?
it's always different. Not, not vastly different, but different in minute ways, in many, many minute ways. And, that's the beauty of the live theater,
But that's the scary part of it, too. How do you know what to do if it's different? Like she said she fell one night.
Yeah, she did. And fortunately, the way we responded to it, the audience didn't know that it was an accident.
Yeah.
They thought it was part of the play because we just played it. But it's part of being a performer, Joan. As you ask what do you do if things go differently. But that's part of the sort of the flying blind, kind of on the high wire without a net, as it were. You're out there as a performer, and you have to trust that the work that you've done in rehearsal and your focus on the character is going to lead you into the unexpected in a way that's going to be a pleasing experience for yourself and the audience.
So we've talked about your relationship with your co-star, because it's only the two of you. What happens with the audience? Can you hear them? Can you feel them? Do they make your performance any different?
It's a great question, particularly for this play, because, as you know, this play is in a very small theater.
I know.
And so it makes for a very intense relationship between the audience and the actors. Because the theater is so small, and the set has been constructed so as the audience feels that they are in the house, because the walls of the house
They go this way?
go to the outside boundaries of the
Oh, right. They go out to the front door. Right, yeah.
And because it's such a small theater, Eve and I don't have to worry a lot about projecting. So we can give a very detailed performance, and we can almost give a film performance, and the audience is close enough to see what's going on with us. And because it's such a small house and there's no footlights, the audience is lit.
But when you're on the phone, does anyone ever react in the audience? I wanted, because you're talking and you're like you don't want anyone to hear you, and sometimes I think someone wants to say, "Who are you talking to? What are you doing?"
No one has ever did that, but a lot of times people laugh or whatever. I'll hear people make sounds like or
Yeah.
or laugh. There's a lot of laughter usually, and I have to say, for the first few previews, it took me a while to get used to the idea that I was seeing everybody in the audience, because my character has to look out those windows, those pretend windows,
yes, into us,
into that fourth wall area, which is the audience, and I can see everyone. So it took me 2 or 3 performances to figure out how to conduct my eye line.
Right.
So because the first couple performances, I kept looking people right in the eye, which is very disconcerting, and
for the audience too.
Yeah, for the audience too. Yeah.
Yeah, for both of us, because it's interesting when you say there were no footlights, because usually actors say, "Oh, I couldn't see past the second row," or "the lights were in my eyes," and you're like right in their eyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before we leave, I want to just say that this Indie Film Award that you got in Michigan for your independent water walk, just talk a little bit about that. You're from Michigan, right?
I'm from Michigan. I grew up in Detroit. I lived there until I graduated from Wayne State University, and then I went to New York, where I lived for 12 years and went to NYU, and then
became a big hit.
Yeah.
12 years, 13 years.
Yeah, and then I came out to LA, and I live in Culver City now with my family, which is great.
I love Culver City.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
I live just 4 doors down from the historic Culver City Studios. So
that's
it's
great.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, Water Walk is a picture about a father and a son and his adopted son who go on a very adventurous 1,000-mile canoe journey.
Oh, wow.
It's based on the book of the same name. And I starred in it and directed it. And it was my first directing job as a film director. And we did very well. We've played in over 150 screens in the Midwest.
And you got this big award, which was great in Michigan, because it was like the homeboy coming home, right?
Yeah, and they gave us a nice award, and it's a beautiful film. It's a lovely film. It's very low budget. So, you know, when you see it, you see that the production value isn't, you know, top of the line, but it has a big heart, and it has some very good performances from some Midwestern actors, many of whom we found at Milwaukee Rep.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And you have a big heart.
Well,
We can tell.
Thank you.
We can tell. Thank you so much
Thank
for being with us.
Thank you so much.
And we'll be
Joan.
right back with author Matthew Spektor. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back to the Joan Quinn Profiles. We're taping here at the Hollywood Museum, and I'm with author Matthew Spektor, who was born and raised in LA, attended Hampshire College, and received an MFA at Warren Wilson College. I've never heard of that, so I don't know where it is.
It's in North Carolina.
Oh, it's from North Carolina.
Yep.
Okay. He's worked in New York as a development executive, and he's gone on to author 3 books. You didn't start writing, did you?
I did actually start writing.
Then how did you become an executive at one of these companies?
You know, in a very roundabout way. I grew up here. You know, I have an industry family. My dad was a talent agent. My mom was a screenwriter. I was always really interested in literature. I always wanted to be a writer. You know,
and where'd you go
14.
to school here?
I went to Crossroads.
Oh, you went to...
So yeah.
Did
course.
you take literature classes?
I
did. You take writing
I
classes?
took literature classes, and I took. Of course, there was a wonderful film professor there too. There was, you know, Jim Hosney, the legendary Jim Hosney, who also taught at AFI.
Yes.
And you know, I mean, I guess I always sort of felt, you know, I was passionate about the movies, but more passionate about literature.
But that was, you had celebrities coming over to your house all the time.
Sure.
Because your father, whom I knew.
Right.
I was like trying to remember if I knew you, because we used to always meet at Al Ruddy's house
Right.
or at different parties.
Sure.
So say hello to Fred for me.
I will.
But was it because those people were coming over, or were you like that on your own, or from your mother's influence?
Probably,
or?
it was probably a little bit my mom's influence. You know, I mean, it was just something that I was very clear early in life that this was
So
what I wanted
lucky.
to do.
Yeah.
I wanted to, you know, be first and foremost an author, and you know.
So you had written then when you were still in high school, when you were in college?
Yeah. I was writing in high school. I was writing in college.
So when you came out of North Carolina, did you go right to New York?
You know, it was the path was a little more circuitous than that. I graduated from college, and then I moved to San Francisco, and it was while I was living in San Francisco that I got a job. I was doing some sort of consulting work for Francis Coppola, and Francis called me one day and said, you know, would you be interested in coming to work for me full time? And I said, yeah, you know, I probably would, right?
Why not, right?
I said, what do you have in mind? He said, well, you know, the thing is, I want to hire someone, and I'm not going to hire them here. I want someone to go to New York and find, you know, short stories to turn into movies. And I just couldn't believe it. I thought, that's a job, you know?
Right.
And as soon as I realized that was a job, I thought, well, I don't have to do it for Francis. So I made some calls and I wound up doing it. You know, Francis ultimately that became his magazine. But it took a year or two for him to, he approached me long before that ever happened. And I was so...
But you were at these big companies.
Yeah. Well, I went to work for Tribeca.
Yeah.
And then I went to work for Jersey Films, which was Danny DeVito and his partners. And
Tribeca was
De Niro and Jane Rosenthal.
Right.
And, you know, so first for Tribeca, then for Jersey.
So you went in to these places looking for work?
I went in realizing that, you know, that there was one job in the movie business that made more sense for me than for anybody, which was looking for adaptable material.
Developing material.
Right.
Well, were you thinking of yourself because you were writing then? Were
I
you
was
thinking
also
of developing your own work?
No, I was actually, mostly what I was thinking about was it would be a great way to get to know people in publishing without having to work in publishing.
I see.
It was like I could go be kind of a spy.
Because I thought maybe that was what led you to do that, because you were writing and you had this background?
It was quite, I mean, it turned out to be very inspired in a lot of ways. It was also useful for me as a writer because I was, the time difference worked in my favor. My bosses were all in LA, so I was 3 hours ahead of them.
Oh, they were.
So that if I stayed home and wrote in the morning, I could walk into my office at 11 o'clock, and you know, my phone would ring, and they'd think I'd been there all day.
Which is really true.
Really, I'd been home writing for hours.
Because they don't get up at 7 to call you at 10.
Nope.
No, but we talked about Fred Spektor, your father, very big in the business. Do you think that was a help or a hindrance?
Well, In the context of the business, probably
in your career.
both. I think it was a little bit. I think it was a little bit of a help insofar as it, kind of helped me. Or I knew the landscape. I knew who the people.
But you knew
were.
the people,
Sure.
so that helped in that
Sure,
way.
and it would be, disingenuous to say that wasn't helpful. The hindrance probably because I was stubborn about not using that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what happens so many times. That's why I
Right.
wondered if you had that
Right.
attitude
Right.
for a
Sure.
little bit. You did.
Yeah, for a little bit I did.
But
Yeah.
you know that in the long run, it really does. Who cares if they open the door and you can produce?
Right. Right.
And
I
you
did,
were
and I did
producing, and
for-
you were
for-
writing.
for many years.
Yeah. So tell us what other things you wrote before we
prior
got
to
to
this-
American Dream Machine.
Prior to this, I wrote a first novel called That Summertime Sound, which came out in 2009, I believe. I wrote a nonfiction book about The Sting, of all things, about the movie The Sting, which came out in 2010.
Why did you do that?
It
It was already old, The
yeah,
Sting.
it was. But I was invited to write I was basically asked, if I would write a short book. It's a sort of a, almost like a novella-length kind of book. And they said, you can write about any movie that you want to. And, initially I said, well, maybe I'll write about Fight Club, because I had been at Fox 2000.
Fight
We
Club,
made Fight
right,
Club, and that was such an interesting, such an interesting movie. And I was sitting there one day, kind of procrastinating on beginning this book. And I looked up at the TV that was in the room where I was, and I saw The Sting was on, and I thought, man, I love that movie. I loved it when I was a kid, and it had such interesting resonances for me. It was one of those movies that I think I was probably 5 years old.
Yeah,
when I
but you
first saw it. I was
remembered it,
tiny.
right?
Yeah, I not only remembered it, but I was so in love with it before I could understand it. And I thought, there's something about, that's what writing or
Right.
encountering a piece of art in a lot of ways, it
It's
is.
how what speaks to you.
Right, right. And I felt that there was something in that, and something in the fact that that movie, as beloved as it is, I think was also kind of somewhat underrated by critics at the time. I think people thought of it as being an entertainment, and I think of it as a Watergate movie. Like I think of it as a political movie, and as a sort of, very
Is that how your
subtle.
piece
That's
reads?
part of it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And was that adapted? One of your novels was adapted to a screenplay?
Well, this one is currently under option at Showtime, and I'm writing a pilot to develop it into a series. Yeah.
So, do you write scripts for other people,
I
from
do.
other people's
yeah,
work?
Sure. Yeah, I have. The first
And
script.
is that the influence from your mom, who was a scriptwriter?
At the end of my time as an executive, when I'd been working at Fox 2000, there was a novel that I had wanted to adapt, at the studio, and I couldn't quite get the, my colleagues and bosses there to pull the trigger on it. And so the moment that I left, the novel was this great book by Shirley Hazard called The Transit of Venus. And an old assistant of mine who'd gone to work for a producer called me up and said, well, do you want to write that yourself? Well, we'll option the book for you and we'll pay you.
Oh, great.
And I thought, well, I'm not going to say no to that. I'm not going to say no to that either. So,
So that's what happened?
yeah, so I did that, and then I, sort of did some feature writing for a number of years after that.
Would you write the screenplay for this?
Yeah, well, I'm writing the pilot. Sure.
Oh, you are?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
So tell us the story of American Dream Machine.
Yeah, I basically wanted, having all of this Hollywood history in my, blood and environment, I guess I've always been a little unsatisfied with the way that the movie business is depicted on the page and on the screen. And even at its best, it doesn't matter whether
that's
it's,
interesting.
Michael Tolkien or Nathaniel West or,
Right.
Joan Didion, like so many people have written about it and have done it so well. But I've also felt that they've always done it in a way that was fairly satirical and acerbic, and I thought,
So you're defensive in a way.
well, sure, yeah. Isn't everybody?
That's great, though, because it's like you're not just accepting what's
of course,
great.
right. And I thought, I wanted to kind of redraw the map of Los Angeles a little bit, and redraw the literary map of Los Angeles, and in particular, the writers that I like tend to be fairly kind of hot-tempered and warm and more emotional.
The writers that influenced you.
Sure.
And let me just interject here, because you were one of the co-founders of LA Review of Books.
Sure, yeah.
Which is like a great, source for people.
Sure, exactly.
So you're very familiar with all those writers. Go on.
I was very, I've always been a big fan of, Philip Roth and Saul Bellow, and, people where there was a sense of I think of those writers as being very, very emotional, very, very emotionally rich, and I think of a lot of the, kind of Los Angeles identified writers and the ones that I grew up reading as somewhat cooler in their temperament.
Cooler,
and
yeah,
I thought,
yeah.
can I write a story about the movie business that partakes of that more kind of.
So that's Bo,
Yeah,
your protagonist.
that's Bo,
But
yeah.
he's kind of, he's not your father.
Nope.
He's kind of a sloppy guy.
Yeah,
You're not
yeah,
like that.
no,
Your dad's not
no,
like that.
yeah.
Who does he resemble? Oh, maybe Coppola.
Well, could be.
Maybe a conglomerate.
It's a kind of an aggregation of people. It really is. I mean, he's, beyond composite.
So what does he do?
What does Bo do?
Yes.
Well, in the book, he starts his career as an agent in the early '60s, and I wanted, what I really also wanted to do was, I've noticed that the business has become infinitely more corporate. When I was younger, it was personality driven and it was
creative,
idea driven,
right?
and creatively
More
driven.
creative,
right? And I think within the last 15 or 20 years, especially, the movies have really. It's no longer about this writer has an idea or this filmmaker wants to do this. It's this studio owns this property, and they're going to hire these people to, that's the absolute center of the feature film business these days is really about franchise movies.
So the one thing that the critics have said about American Dream Machine is how the landscape.
Right.
You can describe everything.
Sure.
Of course, you're native Californian, right?
I am. I'm a native Angelino. And I hope, one of the things that people seem to have responded to, the book has a very, very kind of tactile sense of Los Angeles and a very kind of detailed geographical sense of it. But one thing I was concerned about when you say that I know the landscape, I mean, it's also true, I know the landscape of the movie business, but I was very interested in not writing a book that was going to be insider-ish in that way.
Oh, interesting.
And which I think, so as much as I think this book is sort of grounded in certain realities there, I worked really hard to make sure that it isn't just, that it doesn't have that kind of cloistered, quality of sort of over-describing.
Knowing it all, or that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Knowing secrets?
Knowing secrets, knowing gossip, none of that stuff is. None of that stuff is really a big factor in this book.
Well, what are you working on next?
I'm working on the pilot script first
that's
for
right,
Showtime,
right.
and then I've just started another novel, which is In the Way of These Things. I have 100 pages of it, and
What subject?
I can hardly say.
Is that
Not
what
because
happens?
I'm secretive. No, but
it's secretive?
It's not because I'm secretive. It is honestly because the book it continues to change in its.
I see.
There's a section of it at the beginning that's set in San Francisco. There's one set in London. There's one set in Iraq.
Oh, that's so
there's another one
great.
set in Los Angeles, and I don't yet know how they come together. So it's
That's
got a more kind
interesting.
of ranging
I
quality.
think that tells how a writer writes.
Sure. Well,
That's
it's a little
very
differently every
yeah,
time, I think.
Very
Yeah.
good. Before we leave,
Yeah.
I think this is a question I have to ask you. Why didn't you become an agent?
I don't know that I have the temperament for it. It's when I was.
You mean working with people or what?
No. I mean, I think. Well, I mean, I thought about it when I was 14. I went to work in the mailroom at CAA. That was my first job. Then I worked for the story department doing coverage, and I was doing that in high school. And I also started writing at the same time. And it was obvious to me then that writing was the thing that I preferred.
Did one of the agents at CAA who was in the mailroom with you become your agent
Oh,
for the book?
No, I'm not at CAA. I'm at UTA. But I was in the mailroom with Richard Lovett, who is now the president of CAA. So that's how
That
long.
shows how you go up to that.
Right.
And what do I have? Only this little book.
Exactly. Right. I worked at CAA for a summer, and all I bought you
Right.
was this lousy hardcover. Yeah.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Joan.
Thank you. Keep writing to JAQUINN1 at AOL.com, and we'll see you next time on the Joan Quinn Profiles.